politics and religion, they do not mix. They collide. We are here in Washington at St. John's Episcopal Church, also known as Church of the Presidents because of its proximity to the White House. We're here to speak with the Honorable James P. Moore, who served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce under President Ronald Regan and was an advisor to President George H.W. Bush, a key architect of America's global trade and international finance policy in the 1980s. He currently serves as founder, president, and CEO of the Washington Institute for Business, Government, and Society. The Honorable James P. Moore. Sir, welcome.
Thank you very much.
You know, people talk, Jim, a lot about the separation of church and state. Ask a school kid who received a solid education. They'll be happy to tell you the U.S. government is not in the business of partnering with a church body and claiming it as its official faith, right? We don't have that in this country. But is that really a false flag, the church-state distinction? Isn't God and state central to the American experience?
Honestly, I really believe that prayer is so integrated into the American scene that it's pretty difficult to be able to do that. You really try to determine a particular individual's character more than anything. Since the very beginning of our country, when George Washington was sworn into office in New York City, of all places, on Wall Street, one of the first things he did was to make sure that everybody went to the local church to be able to pray at the time that he was being sworn into office. And every president since then has actually worshipped on the day of the inauguration at this wonderful St. John's Church behind me. And what is rather extraordinary is that most all of the presidents actually have called for days of prayer to be able to unite the country. George Washington did it, Abraham Lincoln did it, and most recently President Trump did it in May, to be able to bring the country together, to be able to pray that the coronavirus and all that has come as a result of it can hopefully be taken away. And so prayer is very important. It also, quite frankly, makes us humble as a democracy. The notion that we have to answer to somebody of higher authority than we are, I think, is very comforting. Even for atheists and agnostics, that the President of the United States is going to have to realize that sooner or later he or she is going to have to answer for his or her actions on so much that is not only important to the United States, but is important to the world.
But you would certainly understand if some people would say to you that that's fine if you ascribe to a higher power and assign ultimate authority to that higher power, right? And by that I mean we have, as evidence, if you will, chaplains in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate that are there to attend to the spiritual needs of members. If you've tuned into any of the Supreme Court Justice hearings for not just the most recent Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, but also other justices as well, you will see that religion and faith is always lurking in the background. But does that higher power, or should that higher power, have any influence in matters of state?
Well, certainly to the effect that each one of us is the sum total of everything we've ever seen or heard or felt or experienced. You cannot escape the fact that people who are religious have that component as a part of who and what they are. We've been going through this with a recent Supreme Court justice that has just been confirmed, at least by the panel of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. But I think it's important to realize that religion is a part of who we are. We're never going to escape it. To deny the fact that we are religious people in some way, I think, is to deny the very being of who America and Americans are.
This clearly has been a campaign 2020 unlike any other, at least that I can remember. And trust me, I've voted in a few. And I cannot remember in many ways as contentious a campaign as this one. For example, on a tarmac in Cleveland, President Trump told his supporters that if you vote for Joe Biden, you essentially are voting for a man who will take away your guns and, quote, hurt the Bible, hurt God, unquote. As someone who has known President Trump for over 2 decades, can you offer any insight precisely what the president meant with that statement?
Well, as you mentioned, I worked for Ronald Reagan, who was an extraordinary individual. So clearly I'm a Republican. But I must tell you that I would strongly defend Joseph Biden in terms of his faith from everything that I've been able to gather. And that certainly has existed when I first had the chance to get to know who Joe Biden was when he was early on a senator up on Capitol Hill from the state of Delaware. And so, President Trump recognizes that he is in a relatively unique position in as much as a good portion of his base has been, is, and will continue to be evangelical Christians and people who do have a deep belief in God and prayer.
I asked this of one of our other guests today, and I'll ask it of you now. This campaign has been fought really on three fronts: the pandemic economy, and certainly the racial reckoning. But given what we've talked about today, could we add a fourth front: religion and faith?
As you were mentioning earlier, I am now the founder and the CEO of the Washington Institute for Business, Government, and Society. And I'm a great believer that as we are talking here and you're interviewing me, that America is about to undergo a dramatic transformation. I really believe that we've gotten to a point where the coronavirus, the economic impact, the civil unrest that's taken place, fires on the West Coast, floods a couple of times in the southern part of the United States, have brought us to a point in which we've been exposed, the good, the bad, and the ugly of America. And that we're going to have to be putting together a social contract that allows us to bring together business, government, society, with an overlay of prayer and spirituality that will give us somewhat of a North Star, a moral compass that we can follow to be able to deal with the challenges of the future, because there are many. I'm convinced that on January 1st, people are going to be uncorking champagne bottles, saying their prayers, saying goodbye to 2020, don't want to see you again 2020, but I think 2021 is going to be a challenge. And it's not as though somehow we're going to have a wall between years. It's going to continue for us, and I think it's important to put in perspective how important it is for all of us to be engaged in this. And as so many people have been saying throughout this coronavirus, we're in this together.
Well, this is After All Washington. It's a Thursday afternoon in the middle of a pandemic, and the election is just days away for President of the United States. You could see and hear, the expression of free speech in the form of a horn, honked in support or anger, right? Grievances listed and posted on billboards, right? Ham-made signs carried, speeches made off the cuff. This is America. But the question is, will any of this find its way from the street and from protest into policy and law?
I think so. I think at the end of the day, we are going through a period in which it's really an examination of conscience, of trying to figure out what has happened as a result of this coronavirus. Where has it left America? Has it made us more divided or more unified? In some ways, it's done both. And so how we deal with that and what kind of a future we want to forge for ourselves and our children, there is no question that what we do as a result of this election just a few days from now is going to determine the future for generations to come.
Jim, thank you for your time today. Please stay safe, and don't forget to vote.
Thanks so very much.